This is the Course of Action podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Clark. My debut book, Hear These Truths, the ultimate guide to building your leadership algorithm, is available now wherever books are sold. Check it out on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and for signed copies, go to jeffclarkofficial.com and get in touch. Don't forget to follow on social media, leave a 5-star review for the book, and hit that subscribe button for the latest episode notifications. And as always, enjoy the episode. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Course of Action podcast. My guest today is a current Naval Intel Officer in counterintelligence and human intelligence, which we're going to get her to define here in a little bit. But she's also the author of 3 novels and 1 graphic novel.
That's correct.
It's A.M. Adair. Did I get it right?
You absolutely did. Yeah,
Perfect.
you don't have to keep doing the AM. My first name's Ama, which, I
Okay.
get a lot of teasing because my first name and my initials are identical. But that
Yeah.
kind of makes it fun.
Yeah, that is. It makes it interesting. That's cool. So 3 novels and 1 graphic novel.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna get into those here in a little bit, but we're gonna talk what you're doing now, which is you're in that transition phase out of the military, right?
I am officially on terminal leave, so it's
Nice.
it's that much more real to me now. It's like when
Mhm.
because I started on SkillBridge, and for those who don't know what SkillBridge is, the DoD has a program that lets you work in the civilian world while you're still on active duty during the last 6 months that you're in, as a way to kind of ease that transition from active duty back into the civilian infrastructure. And I cannot give that program enough accolades. It is worth its weight in gold. Because you think you know how you're going to transition back, but until
Yeah,
you
you don't.
actually do it,
Yeah.
it's quite telling. So I
Yeah,
feel
they didn't have SkillBridge when I transitioned.
well, they still
So
don't talk about it.
I know
It's
it's a
weird.
shame. You have to learn about it like this. You really
Exactly.
do. You have to get in touch with people. And that's why I maintain a presence on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn gives me such a connection to other veterans in the community that know stuff, because they're still not talking about SkillBridge like they should. And it's such a fantastic program. You're proof of it. There's a lot of people that are proof of it. And it's such an awesome deal to get to work while on active duty for a company. Granted, it doesn't guarantee a job. However,
Yep.
you get 6 months of getting your feet wet, having time to do your thing, network, and you're still getting paid. That takes such a huge stress off of everybody's shoulders. I just can't imagine. I wish they would have had it, but I've been a big advocate of it ever since I've heard of it.
And I'm right there with you, and I will continue to be an advocate because it is truly amazing and totally worth it. There's no training that can prepare you for this. You just got to do it.
Oh yeah, no, I've been out for 5 years and I'm still learning things. I'm still dealing with things that I didn't think I was going to deal with. And it's just one of those things that, man, the TAPS program, all those briefings, all those things, it doesn't teach you the street smarts that you need to separate and take the uniform off. It just doesn't. And it's good stuff. I don't want to bash it or anything, but it just doesn't. It doesn't give you what you need. It really doesn't. And it's congressionally mandated. So that tells you,
Yep.
they're checking the box, but whatever. I mean, so you're in SkillBridge right now. You're with Deliver Fund, is it?
I am, and I'm even though I'm on terminal leave, I'm going to stick with Deliver Fund probably a little while longer. Um, it's been a really good experience with those guys because their mission's incredible, and right now I'm free labor for them. So I mean I'm just there to try to help out as much as I can with the time that I have there, and I'm not getting paid for it, so it's not. It's literally I just do it because I want to at this point, and then. One of the things I've learned is that I think I need to take a little bit of a break from having a job where, like, it sounds a little dramatic, but the weight of the world is on your shoulders.
Yeah.
I want a 9 to 5 for a little bit where I can leave it behind when I clock out. And that's something I haven't had in the last couple of decades. And while I'm still passionate and I still get, those, you probably know, you get amped up. You're like, I know I can do this. I know I can do this. And you want to get after it. And then, yeah, maybe it's time for me to let the young guys take over. And as much as it's an ego check for me, I've had to come to admit it's time to let the young guys take over.
It is. It's tough. You see, especially when you see, like, I went right back to work for the government when I retired. So I was right there watching the units that I used to interact with. And it was hard to bite my tongue. It was hard to kind of let go. I needed the stability of the government to help me transition, but you know, I still felt some kind of way about it, and you almost missed it more because you were around it so much more. But yeah, there's a point, and I think I'm getting to that point now where I'm looking for kind of a change, doing something a little different, a little less stress. Focus on some other projects that what I want to work on, some passion projects, having some fun and changing the job to more of a 9 to 5, collecting my paychecks, still being happy about it, still having passion for it. Just, you know, uh, different priority in life.
And I get it. And I think a lot of people get to that point eventually. And you know what? I'll probably come back to it. I'll probably do a 9 to 5 and it'll be good. It'll be what I need right now. Then, a year or two down the road, that bug's probably going to come right back and I'm going to want to get my hands dirty again and I'm going to throw myself right back into the fray. But then I'll be in a better place, kind of mentally.
Yeah.
Priorities will have shifted a little bit, I'm certain. So it's going to be
Yeah.
good.
Well, and my kids are a little older now. So
That's a big
they're they're
factor.
they're 5 years from all being out of the house and into college. So, I have a lot more time on my hands. I don't have as much stress having to, constantly watch them, and so your mindset changes a little bit. It gets a little different, and it's all part of the transition. Your life changes, and then of course you have life change with leaving the uniform behind. But it is what it is. So Deliver
Yeah.
Fund, let's talk about that.
Okay.
For those who don't know what Deliver Fund is, tell them what Deliver Fund does, what their mission is.
So Deliver Fund is a nonprofit private intelligence organization that focuses on human trafficking. And the whole concept of it is to be able to give that intel analysis piece to law enforcement to be able to enable them. So, we all know that, law enforcement does not have enough manpower, man hours, or resources to be able to do everything that they would like to do. So in this case, Deliver Fund's able to, partner up with, departments or, units and help them with their projects. So if anybody's looking to take on a human trafficking case, to get after those kind of networks and bad guys, then we can assist them with identifying leads, of potential either villains or victims, and so it can lead to both arrests and rescuing, which again is extremely rewarding. It's a little dark and disturbing at how much is really out there, but at the end of the day, it really is just about helping the good guys get a leg up, and there's no vigilante action. There is nothing like that. It is just support, and we let law enforcement do their thing.
But you make a great point, and even before the events of recent years, has law enforcement been behind. They've been struggling. They've been undermanned. It's been a tough job to have, and but the real things still need to get done. They're
Yep.
keeping bad stuff off the streets every day, and it gets harder and harder, especially when you're outnumbered. Could you imagine a police force of 50 officers in a city of 50,000 people? I mean, you're
Yeah.
horribly outnumbered, just horribly outnumbered. And how do you still stop bad things from happening? Because that's the expectation of the people. Even people who maybe don't like you, they still expect you to defend them because that's your job. They might
Yep.
not like you for it, and they certainly don't like you when you're maybe busting them for a speeding ticket or something. But you know, the general expectation is your job is to defend me. Why is this bad stuff happening? This is your job. The finger gets pointed, and it's hard to be everywhere at one time, and they can't do everything. And then of course you throw politics into it, and border security and who wants it and who doesn't, who's funding it and who isn't, and all that nonsense. um, it's almost sad that we have to have organizations like Deliver Fund, but it's also a blessing that we have them. So,
Yeah, I mean, I've spent 20 years in the intelligence community, so and I fully appreciate what it is that they're doing, and it is brilliant. And I think you'll hear a lot of intelligence professionals talk about it, where you start off as kind of a jack of all trade, master of none. And one thing everybody really likes and wants to do is become more specialized, because then you can really hone your craft and you can really get good at doing the job, especially if you have one subject matter area. So, part of the beauty of what Deliver Fund did is a lot of those guys, they came from SOF and intelligence backgrounds. And so they took what we were doing in the counterintelligence world, counterterrorism, and then applied that to doing a counter trafficking. And the methodologies and a lot of the way that works mirror up, and it's wonderful. And so, you learn to hunt bad guys doing one thing, and all those things that you learn, the how they think, how they act, what they're going to look for, centers of gravity, rat lines, all those things that became necessary for a target package downrange. Well, just a different kind of bad guy. They need the same things. You just got to figure out exactly what their specific things are, and you build another target package. But in this case, instead of handing it to a bunch of door kickers that might be wearing a trident or whatever the case may be, you're handing it to somebody with a badge who's going to go in and execute a warrant.
so while we're kind of on the subject of it, and you brought it up, let's kind of talk about what intel versus counter intel, and that word counter really is. And this is kind of your bread and butter, your
Oh
specialty here
yeah.
as an intel officer. So for those who don't know, let's break it down in simple terms. What is
Okay.
intelligence?
Okay, so intelligence, when you're talking about it in the military standpoint, or just even the community in general, it's taking data, bits of information, and then fusing them together into what would be called an intelligence product. So, if you look at it like putting together puzzle pieces, and you're trying to figure out what that picture is, and anticipate what pieces you might need, where you're going to find those pieces, what your end picture could look like, and then how you're going to then make recommendations to potentially execute a target, pick up a bad guy, move ships, whatever the case may be. You have to have a basis of knowledge to be able to give that to a decision maker. That's what Intel does. Counterintelligence is a very specific niche in underneath that intelligence umbrella, and it's a lot more defensive in nature. So it is everything that you do to defend against somebody, well, like me, but for a foreign government.
Hmm.
It's counter espionage, it's counter terrorism, it's even counter insider threat. Anything that could be a threat to us, to the military, to the homeland, that's counter intel. So the hard part for a lot of people with that one is, like, say you mentioned human intelligence. So human is more offensive. So that, in which case you would want to go and identify a bad guy, and you would want to then pick up a bad guy, or potentially use a source network to get a bad guy. When counter intel, it's more likely that you're going to, okay, I identified bad guy or used a source to identify bad guy. Now I want to leave bad guy in place, because I want to figure out who bad guy works for. I want to map out his entire network, or I
Okay.
want to
Okay.
feed him bad information that then now he's going to have to feed back to his network. So, human intelligence, I like to say, is like playing chess.
Yeah.
Counterintelligence is
Exactly.
like it. Counterintelligence is through chess blindfolded. So um,
Okay.
it's a
Okay.
lot more. You have to have a lot more patience, a lot more strategy, and there's a lot more nuance. But at the end of the day, it is about protecting. And then human intelligence is about getting after it. It's go after, get the bad guy, go, 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 go. So that's the easiest way to distinguish between the two.
So it's kind of the difference between playing like just defense and playing offense and defense, kind of.
Essentially,
Okay.
essentially. It's like, because you do have to defend it. Like, I have to think about, okay, so let's play with the Cold War. Our Russian counterparts. We all grew up watching James Bond.
Yeah.
That's
Probably the best
spycraft to us.
example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but somebody, some KGB guys, trying to pick up information on us, it would be my job not only to make his life harder and protect us, but then also potentially feed him things or make him believe something that isn't real.
to
Say.
to you
because
to kind
yep,
of
because
start steering him how you want him.
then
Okay,
he's gonna take
okay.
all that information and give it back to all the rest of the Intel guys. They're gonna fuse it together in their product, and they're gonna hand it to their decision maker, who now is gonna make a decision on bad information. Um,
Okay. But what's it?
but
So let me ask this though. So that's your job, but it's also probably being done to you.
yep.
How do you sniff that out? How does that factor into decision making, knowing it very well could be being done to you while you're trying to do it to someone else?
That is one of the most closely held adages that we have, is that there is no such thing as a friendly intel service.
Hmm.
Everybody's collecting all the time. You have to assume it. And, for many, many years, like most of us live that way. So um, I made a joke of it just a few days ago. It's like, for the last couple of decades, I didn't even put any stickers on my car because I wanted to be nondescript. I didn't want anybody being able to easily identify me. My clothes were, all kind of neutral, just all blend into the background. And now that I'm on terminal leave, I put stickers on my car for like the first time. It was just like, ha ha, it was my own little act of rebellion. Um, but it's, I know for a fact I was being collected on. I can unequivocally say it happened. I know that there are target packages out there on me. I know there are dossiers out there on me, and it's just part of the job. You work very, very hard to avoid that, but in this day and age, it's almost impossible, especially in the military, because you have to go as military. I'm not
Hmm.
hiding that I'm military. So it's pretty easy for my movements to be tracked. Yeah, I heard.
Yeah. I tell my kids to be quiet, and this is what happens anyway.
Nope, I get it. My husband actually took my son for a ride because there was no way he was going to be quiet.
So, dang it, I forgot what I was gonna ask you. It was good too.
Sorry.
um, dang. So, let's do this. While we're talking about Intel, um, what's it like really to put together something that could lead to um, probably maybe a serious conflict, an escalation? There's a bit of stress to that, I'm sure, knowing your package could lead a 4-star to make a decision on something that could put your fellow veterans, fellow man in harm's way. Now, I know we all trust each other. There's a bit of trust there, knowing, yeah, if I put them there, I know they're going to handle their job. They're good at their job. Casualties are inevitable, though. So, how does that kind of weigh on your mind when you're doing some of those things, knowing that's a possibility?
Truthfully, you never get used to it. You
Hmm.
kind of numb yourself to it. But anytime an op's going on, especially an op that you were a big hand in, that you were preparing to go out preparing them to go out the door, you're glued to the ISR. You are glued to comms. You are literally on pins and needles. Like, even if the facade is completely calm, you're on pins and needles. Yeah, there's nothing worse in this world than hearing somebody come over the radio and say tick tick tick, and like, you can hear a pin drop. Everybody's just guts drop to the bottom of their stomachs. And luckily, everybody's a professional, and you pick up and you go, and you work through all your pre-planned responses. But at the same time, there's always that thing in the back of your mind. And then the only way that you can really get past it is to do the due diligence. You don't put together crap, you don't give out crap, and um, you don't add fluff. If you don't know something, you don't make it up. You got to be completely honest about it, because if you send somebody out with bad intel, that's on you.
Yeah. So, knowing that and having seen a little bit of it in action, I'm not an
Mhm.
Intel guy, but I've seen a handful of things. Um, how real do movies get it?
Well, it
Like
really depends.
how I, it's glamorized. I know it
It
is,
is. It is.
but how real is it? Like, have you ever watched anything that you were like, okay, that was close?
There's been a few things that we are like, "Oh, Oh, okay. Somebody actually had some really good, consultants come in on this, and that's usually just with tactics when you see them like doing clearing houses or sites, and you're like, oh, somebody actually did a good job. Hell, I just get excited when somebody actually does a mag change correctly, and they don't just have like the endless bullets. But you see,
Right.
you see any
Yeah.
good tactics, you get excited. But I mean, for the most part, most movies are the kind of the one in the million. There are some exceptions. There are some elements out there, let's say, who get to do those one in a million more often than others. But if you are, conventional forces or what we would call white soft, then there's a lot more dry holes than there are touchdowns. So there's for I would say if you added in some frustration of kicking in the door and having nobody there to about every like maybe every 2 or 3 times, and then you have something actually happen, that'd be a little bit more realistic.
Yeah, I've had some friends that were in the army and they were in the heat of Afghanistan and
Mhm,
Iraq, and especially Iraq, and they were kicking in doors, and they're like, you know what, some days it's like going fishing and getting
mhm.
skunked and just drowning worms. He's like, then other days, you got a lot of action. He's like, so sometimes you don't ever get a chance to relax. He's like, in the movies, of course, make it sound like, oh, let's kick in the door, boom, breach, go, guys, next house, well, circle around back, and all that. And it's 15 minutes of, now everybody's in flex cuffs, and it's like, hey, this was a good day. In 15 minutes of the movie, you're like, okay, I mean, obviously, I'm
Yep,
I'm sure that if you breached one house, the house three doors down is probably going to hear one, and two, they're not going to be there when you show up.
yep.
So you kind of wonder how well the movies get it, but of course you have to do the movie magic, because it would be boring if they did, two houses and then three in a row were empty.
Yeah, and
I
that's
mean,
exactly it. And I give a lot of latitude to the movies. I'm not one of those people who, unless it's egregious. If it's egregious and actually pulls me out of the story, then it's a problem. But if it's just
mhm.
kind of, you know, Hollywood-esque, it doesn't bother me that much because I expect to be entertained. If I wanted to watch something that was real, I'd watch a documentary.
Okay. Yeah,
So
you're
I
like me. You're a
yep,
lot like me. I watch movies to be entertained.
yes,
Um, when I was on active duty, the uniforms kind of bothered me sometimes if I saw something blatantly out of place.
yep,
I kind of learned to let that go, and I was just more about entertainment. You know, that's what I like. I know some friends that, like to analyze stuff, and they just go, Hollywood never gets it right." I'm like, well,
mhm.
dude, the army's like 200 something years old. They're never going to get everything right about the. I mean, the Navy SEALs been around forever. So is intelligence. Like, they're not going to get it right, because getting it right, frankly, is probably a little boring when it comes to an action movie.
Yeah,
So,
nobody would wanna watch
let's,
it.
yeah, I mean, let's call it like it is. So, um, but I'm always curious to hear that. I ask a lot of military members that, what did they get your job right? Does Hollywood get your job right? How do you feel that the world portrays, the job and the uniform? And you get those mixed signals, and a lot of people go, sometimes it's not that awesome. But
No.
you have those days.
Well, I mean, when you're military intelligence, I mean, you're essentially the butt of most jokes, and I get it. I get it. The intel community in general usually ends up with egg on its face quite a bit, and that's the hard part about it because you can't. When we do our jobs, nothing happens. Nothing. It's quiet. There's
Oh,
nothing
okay.
tangible to show like, hey,
Never thought
you did
about
a
it
good
like that.
job. Or a bunch of SEALs go and kick in the door. So they're like, hey, look, the SEALs did something awesome. Nobody says, well, hey, Intel, you did something awesome. It's the SEALs did something awesome. You only talk about Intel when they do something wrong. So yeah, say if
Yeah.
you thwart 100 attacks, what's that look like? It looks like nothing. So, how do you justify your existence? How does that end up, getting conveyed in movies?
Yeah. I do like how in Zero Dark 30 they really focused on the intel, and they focused on the analyst and getting to that point. And of course the raid was cool, the way they did it and Osama's compound, but I thought it was cool how they focused on the intel and how it was the dilemma. To me that felt a little more real, like, okay, there are times where you have to go with your gut, and there's a lot of decision makers,
Yep.
and to make that happen and be successful, granted, a certain community got a lot of credit for it, but the people
Mhm.
behind the scenes, really did their job and gave them, opportunity to do what they do really, really well. And I thought that was really cool how they focused on that. On the intel, because they could have focused on the action. They could have done a whole backstory, and the intel was just kind of a little trickle along the way. The movie was about the intel.
I say I'll have to, take your word for it because I actually haven't watched it for one
Mm.
reason. It was like I did read the book, the Triple Agent that the movie's kind of based around, and then of course all the actual accounts. But Jeremy Wise was a good friend of mine,
Oh,
and
really?
um, just knowing that that scene is in there, um,
Hmm.
I haven't been able to bring
Tough.
myself to watch it. So
I
I have
understand.
no doubt it's a perfect movie. But it was hard enough for me to read that book because I
Hmm.
really it was killing me to know how that happened.
Mm.
And I am not a crier, and this is something Eric Bishop and I have actually battled about a little bit. But I'm not an overly emotional person, but it's still chokes me up just thinking about reading the book and everything that happened after. So
Yeah, I
it's
imagine so. I
that's the other
imagine so.
thing. It's like military movies, they feel different with things
Yeah,
like that. They feel
I'm
very
sure.
different.
I'm
So
sure it hits a little closer to home. I'm sure. So let's switch it up for a little bit then.
okay.
Let's go into this. Your experience in Intel has led you into working with the Liver Fund. You've
Hmm.
also wrote 3 books and one
Hmm.
graphic novel. Before we talk about the books, let's talk about this. How did Intel for you change over a 21-year career? Because I'm thinking about it, it's 2022, which means you
Hmm.
you joined around 2000, and that
Hmm.
was before the iPhone. That was before slim laptops. Not to date you or anything. I'm not trying to call you out, but a lot has changed. A lot has changed.
It's funny you say that because we were trying to explain that to my daughter who's going to be 10 just here soon. So
Yeah.
she was she was so confused that my husband and I weren't around when there were like cell phones and like
Yeah.
not everybody had a laptop and everything like
Yeah.
that. And like we were trying to explain how the telephones were attached to the wall. And she's
Hmm.
like, wait a minute, you mean like a telegraph? I was like, oh my God, how old do you think we are?
No. No,
Come
our
on,
TVs were
man.
not flat. They didn't hang on the wall. Like if you walked into somebody's house and they had a big screen TV mounted kind of like in a television cabinet, they had money. They're like, oh, you're
Yep.
doing
It
good.
was a big
Like
deal.
now everybody has a flat screen mounted on the wall, no matter what their house looks like from the curb. So it's funny. My kid said something to me the other day. I can't remember what it was, but it was something along the lines of that. And I was like, I kind of looked at him like he was stupid, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "But," and then it clicked. Oh, he doesn't know anything different. He
Yep.
grew up
With
only
this.
knowing this, whereas I had to transition from it, and then I felt like the dummy because I was looking at him like he was an idiot. Like, why are you asking me that? That's such a stupid question. And then it dawned on me. I was like, actually, I'm in the wrong because I just assumed. Like, and it's just so much has changed. The world has changed so much in 21 years. Technology has just exploded. How did that change how you did your job?
Massively, actually. I remember going through school to learn my trade, like initially, and I didn't even know how to type at that point. But I mean, we were still like PowerPoint was the new hotness. It was the new thing, and we were still learning how to do map overlays like on a projector, and so technology was starting to get there, but it's nowhere where close where it is now. So like just learning how to do a brief using PowerPoint was huge high tech. Like now I'm like a ninja. I could put out PowerPoint in no time.
Oh boy, didn't that get out of hand?
Oh yeah,
Golly.
God, yeah. Death by PowerPoint, everybody. Here we go.
Oh
Um,
man.
but then all those technology things, everything became both a pro and a con because some of it made our lives easier, but then if it made our lives easier, chances are it made the bad guys lives easier too, and so that you constantly are adjusting tactics. And one of the things I've seen over the years, and of course anything that's very large like government, military, it's slow to change. And sometimes you have to have things happen for anybody to enact change. But generally speaking, Intel tends to be at the forefront of saying, hey, this is a thing. We need to start looking at this. It might take everybody a while to catch up, but you know,
Right.
proof of concept. We never stopped looking at Russia, never once. As like because as an Intel guy, you're looking at who the really great intelligence apparatuses are around the world. It doesn't matter if they are adversary or ally. If you're good at your job, we're paying attention to you. What are your tactics? What are you interested in? That's something you're always looking at. So everybody's talked in the news a lot here lately about the shift in focus, but it might have been a shift in focus politically, it might have been a shift in focus operationally, but it wasn't a shift in focus for the Intel community. We were already looking at it.
Yeah, I'm not an Intel guy or from special operations or anything like that, but I've always been a student of it. I've kind of watched it closely, always wanted to learn more about it, and it seems like just what you said, the things that made our job easier also made it easier for someone else. It also
Hmm.
put us at risk. The minute we quit putting as so much intel and important things on paper and started digitizing them, convenient, it opens you up to new vulnerabilities. And
Yep.
now, in the last 20 years, cyber command and cyber ops and all that, cyber intelligence and all that has really exploded.
Hmm.
And how did that kind of, in the last, like, let's say 5 to 7 years, how did that really change your job?
Oh, okay. So the biggest thing that any of us have seen, and it does kind of delve into the realm of science fiction, but it is science fact. We know there's efforts for people to have artificial intelligence. Everyone talks about big data analytics, people being able to do machine learning. That's a thing. And nobody thinks about how much of your life is on your digital footprint. So
Right.
how much of every detail of our worlds is available in a digital format.
It's
So,
almost scary. Like, I'm looking at my phone now, and you can pull up like a Google Maps, and it can track like the last locations you've been at.
mhm.
You can go online and look up somebody's phone number and trace it back to them. You
Yep,
know, the digital, footprint, like you said, you almost have a
it's
digital
huge.
resume, and it makes you wonder, like, what all's out there that maybe I don't know about. You
If you haven't
know,
Googled yourself, I highly recommend doing that, just so that way you know.
it's almost like scary.
It is.
Like, what the heck could the world actually have on me? Not that I'm guilty of anything, but what are they collecting on me that I don't want them to?
That's another thing that I mean, essentially anything that goes out over the airwaves, like this is online. This is going to be things that's going to be captured by some server somewhere. Now, if that server is owned by somebody who then sells that information to a third party, it's a massive amount of data. And so up until this point, nobody really it literally is a needle in a haystack that is extra like I can't even come up with the amount of zeros and ones behind it. But um, now that you have the ability to add in artificial intelligence capabilities, they have the ability to get through that data a lot faster and to pull out those little bits and nuggets that then somebody like me could then sit around and go, okay, that's of interest, that's of interest, that's crap, ooh, grab that. But instead of trying to figure it out all ourselves, you're assisted by having things that are brought into you. So all those data points are coming in from everywhere and everything you do. um, like biometrics, that's another thing. It's like
Yeah.
it's everywhere. And so that makes it very difficult, especially when you're talking about clandestine operations. How do you do really anything?
Yeah. So again, going back to what makes your job easier can also make it more difficult.
Mhm.
We went from having a passcode on a phone to swiping to a fingerprint to now it's a face ID. The face opens up the phone. It also opens up certain apps on the phone. Like, you could, for all purposes, be lying there dead, and somebody could hold your phone over your face and then have access to your entire world. And it sounds awesome.
But
Movies did it for decades.
it's
It's super
actually it's in my
convenient.
book.
Yeah. You know, horribly scary though what it could do
Yeah.
in the wrong
Well,
hands, and that's very, very creepy. So let's talk about how that kind of plays into your books. You use a lot of your experience. It's very clear if you read your
mhm.
bio and then you read your books. Um, it's very clear. And I'm not saying that in an insulting way. I'm saying it
Yeah.
in a way of it's obvious that you know what you're talking about and a lot of thought has gone into it.
Yeah.
And
I appreciate that.
to me, it was very evident. It was very evident. And I think that's very cool because, I read a lot of thrillers. I'm trying to work on one myself. Um, and you read who it is and you find out what they've done. And then you go, okay, I kind of expect some things, you know? So to kind of know it's a little refreshing in a way, you
Well,
know,
I appreciate that.
you get a lot of Navy SEALs, a lot of Rangers, and nothing against those guys. Love them all. And they write books and they write books about what they know. And it's cool to see someone else write about what they know um, in a manner that is still very right on target, right bullseye. And I don't want to give up any spoilers because I want people to go buy your books. But I really like the character. It's Elle Anderson, right?
Correct.
Okay. Where did Elle Anderson come from?
Okay. Um, so I've told the story a few times, so I'm going to not try to rehash things that I've already said a bunch. But I I had an incident in Baghdad where I was in the convoy and we had one of those hair raising moments, like those something's going to go wrong. You just feel it. You felt it in the air, and luckily it didn't, but that got my brain spinning. Like instantly, my brain was like, okay, well, what if, what if, what if? And that kind of led me down a rabbit hole. Like this movie scene was playing out in my head. Of
Mhm.
course, at the time I was thinking, what would happen to me if this happened? Um, and then that scene just kept playing and playing, and eventually that became what I centered my first book around. It was like just that scene, and I started playing with it, and I said, okay, if I were free to react any way that I would want to, what kind of character would I want to be? What kind of person would I want to be? And
Mhm.
that's how I came up with the kind of the concept of Elle Anderson. She wasn't named Elle Anderson at the time. Her name actually changed, but it evolved from there. And it evolved from the character into, okay, well, if I have this great character, who would I want to have supporting her? And then, okay, if I were here, taking on terrorism, which of course we were at the time, how would I want to approach it? So that's how I kind of like, that's how it all happened. It was a very creative outlet, but a lot of it was based in, my own personal experiences, and the characters are kind of a mashup of a bunch of different traits from the people that I was fortunate enough to serve with. Even some of the bad guys are modeled after people that I may or may not have come across. Um, and I just kind of ran with it. And for years, I stutter stepped with the idea of, writing a book, and it just never worked. It wasn't until I started playing with this and just let the characters actually be the characters instead of trying to force it where I wanted it to go. I just let the characters take over. And I know that sounds weird, but
No, it
yeah,
sounds right on.
it's a difficult concept for somebody who doesn't write to understand. But once that happened, then it became fun. It became an adventure, like sitting down to write. It was just like, okay, what's going to happen next? And um, it was rough. My first book was rough. The first draft was rough, but my literary manager, took a chance on me, and then he hooked me up with my editor, and she's brutal and evil, and God, I love her because she's wonderful. She's taught me a lot, and so through each of the books, I have gotten better, and I actually have something tangible for that, because when I did Shadow War, book 3, when I sent her my first copy, I was braced for impact. I was like, when it comes back, it's going to be bleeding red, and she's going to cut like 20,000 words out of it. I think she cut like 500. And I was just like, yes! It was like, I threw like a party, and then she's like, no, I need you to add detail here. I'm like, wait a minute, did you just tell me to add? It's like, I was excited. It's like,
Well, hey, that's
what?
pretty
Huh?
good. For what was it was probably what close to 90,000 words.
I actually want to say it is around 80.
Okay.
But we did trim it down again because she asked me to add, and then we explored some more things. And then, of course, with the thriller, you do tend to sacrifice detail for flow. So
Yep.
that's what happened. There were a lot of things like detail wise that I can't put in. They asked me repeatedly, like, "Hey, could you do go into more detail?" And yes, but then I also know I have to get it screened by the Pentagon, and there's no way
Yeah, you'll
it's
get that
it's
little
getting
black
through.
line going through the words like Jack
Yep,
Carr did,
yep,
and I think if you give them the opportunity to look at it, they're gonna mark out more than they really probably
yep,
should, as Jack Carr knows all too well. He made it very public how upset he was about one of his, I think it was
yep.
Savage Son that they did that to him on,
There's a lot they took
and
out.
it looked like somebody just went to a Sharpie with half the book, and I was like, wow, wow, like.
I have a theory about it. I really do think it has to do with what you actually did. So because he was a SEAL, he's talking about a SEAL, even if it's stuff that's public record, by him saying it, it gives it a little bit more oomph and credence behind it. And I think that's why they're so shy about it. This is just a theory. But I also think that's why I have an easier time because one, I'm pretty good at writing for release, just part of my job, but I'm also writing a character that was CIA. I was never CIA. So there's this
Mhm.
whole latitude of creative, juices I could utilize because I was never actually in the CIA. So I have plausible deniability.
There you go. That's smart. So, female protagonist,
Hmm.
female author.
Hmm.
Did you ever sit there and wonder, because the spy military thriller genre is very male heavy, a lot of male characters, a lot of male authors,
Hmm.
um, a lot of male readers too, for all intents and purposes. Um, did you ever sit there and go, "Ooh, it's already going to be kind of tough for me as a female author breaking in, and I'm stacking the deck with a female protagonist." Did you ever question it, or did you? What was your thoughts behind that?
So truthfully, I wanted something to be out there that potentially my daughter could read in years to come. I mean, I'm not letting her read my books now, not like
Maybe a
much,
few
much
years.
later. But
Yeah.
I, I I grew up wanting to be either Indiana Jones or James Bond. Those were my heroes growing up. I did not
Hmm.
have a female action hero. I didn't have anybody really that I could gravitate towards. I mean, there were some comic booky stuff and there were some superheroes, but nothing real.
Hmm.
Or
Yeah.
yeah. So I wanted that, and I really wanted to try to do it justice. And I didn't want to do the damsel in distress. I hate that with a passion, but um, again, I wanted something that like women could identify with who weren't into romance novels because there are some of us out there.
Hmm. Sure,
But
it's a huge genre. I mean, it's a massive genre.
yeah, all of that to say, I mean, it did cross my mind because I used my initials instead of my first name because I didn't want anybody to be immediately turned off by a female author and a female protagonist. So that I mean, it does look nice on a cover as well. So aesthetics played a factor, but my first thought was I did not want anybody just to look at the cover and go, "A chick wrote that. Yeah, I'm not interested."
Mm.
So, and I can't say I blame them. It's like
Yeah,
it's,
I'm more of a. I like a good story. I
and
like
that's
a good
great.
story, a good concept. I'm not as concerned about who the author is because there's a handful of authors that I don't follow on social media. And it's because they use their platform to speak about some of their personal beliefs and stuff.
Hmm.
And I don't necessarily agree with them. I don't follow them because I don't want to really hear about it. Um, I kind of want to know them as the author. Now they have all rights to say, and just like you do, and everybody else does. You have all rights to say whatever you want to on your social media platform. I'm not going to tell you otherwise. But for me, I like to be as a student of it and as a reader of it who likes to be entertained. I want the story. I don't care who you are. I don't care. I care about your background because it could lend a lot of credibility to the writing, to the story. It could kind of make it a little bit, more exciting, but I'm not worried about it. I think that if you put a female in a lot of the roles that have been filled by males in some of these books, they'd be just as good. I really do. Um, so I think it's for me, it's really nice. It's refreshing to see the genre kind of expand. It's nice to see someone like you issue. You're on your third book. I mean, third book and a
Mhm.
graphic novel. Some people are lucky. Like I feel lucky just to do one book. I mean, I got my leadership book out now, and I'm like, this could be it, guys. I could be milking this cow for a while, you know, because I don't know if it's going to come again. You're on three with a graphic novel and hopefully working on a fourth.
I am.
So that's a big deal, I think, to the genre that I don't think maybe gets spoken about enough. Um, of the dynamics of it. I mean, what has been your reception so far?
It's been phenomenal. It's like I've gotten a lot of support, obviously, from my military friends and family, and my own personal family. But beyond that, and I think you've experienced this too, is like the thriller author community is amazing.
Yeah.
Whether you're going to Thriller Fest or whether you're just kind of in the social media circle, the support for everybody is incredible. And I think most people do feel like you do. They want the good story. There's no real competition amongst the authors because you're going to go through that book and then what? You're just going to sit around and say, I'm not reading anybody else's stuff because I only read this one author? No. And I think everybody recognizes that. We all are consumers of our genre as well. We want more material, so we're rooting
Hmm.
each other on.
Yeah.
Um, that it can make us all better.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I referenced Eric earlier. Eric's killing me in his next book. And we had maybe a little bit of trash talking where he claimed that I would be so emotional over my death scene because it was so epic that I would shed a tear. And as I said earlier, I don't cry very easily. So there might be something in the future where I might have to cold read that just to, see if I have to eat my words. But like that kind of thing, it's fun. I think it probably made him bring his A game a little bit more because now he's going to want to see me fail,
Yeah.
and if I fail, I will absolutely happily eat my words because that'll be some seriously great writing.
Right. Yeah.
I might figure out revenge tactics though, but I mean that's for another day.
Right. Yeah. Um, I talked to him the other day. I talk to him often. And me and him just kind of vent about stuff.
Mm.
Um, we talk about writing, and he's been a huge supporter of my book, even though I'm in the nonfiction drama with the leadership. I've told him how, my story of wanting to do a novel, but I felt doing something necessary was what I needed to do before I did something fun. And me and him have just we've stayed in touch. We're going to go to BoucherCon this year together, and really excited about that. Um, it has been a very welcoming community. I really was surprised. I thought being an author would be super competitive. I thought some of the other people would look at it and go, fresh meat, your competition. What are you trying to steal from me? What are you trying to do? Because this is all about sales. And I've been humbled, at least in the fiction side. I haven't really experienced much in the nonfiction side yet, but on the fiction side, just talking to people and talking to them, and then be like, "Hey, man, good luck with your story. I really like the concept. Like I never heard anybody be like, you know what? That's a horrible idea. I would not publish that if I was you. I would not give that out to anybody. Nobody has flat out told me that. So I think that's a kind of a testament to the community. It's not what people thought it was. It's not this cutthroat thing. Brad Thor is not at the top with a gavel, slamming it down, endorsing certain people.
Cannot
Like
be here.
yeah, Jack Carr and Andrews and Wilson, all those guys, they're good dudes. They're not up there
They're
at the top.
amazing. They're
Yeah.
amazing. But no, you're absolutely right. I've heard other communities are not like the thriller community,
Hmm.
but again, that's why I'm really happy with my genre. Is like not only do I love reading it, but everybody in it thus far has been incredible.
So we can't wrap this up without talking about the books.
I'll be quick.
We've talked a little bit about them, but let's really talk about the last one, which is
Okay.
Shadow War, the
I see you
third
have it
book.
up there. It's like,
Right, I got it right here. So, not without I don't want to give away any spoilers, but
okay.
this one is kind of you see Elle, I would say, in a more mature of a scenario. She's kind of taken things a little bit more into her own hands, and she's really on a purpose from like page one. And how did I know the answer to this, but I want you to kind of say it out loud. How did you come up with the concept for this book without the human trafficking piece? How'd you come up with that without giving it away?
That piece, actually, truthfully, I'd already been supporting Deliver Fund, and I had seen some of the stuff that they had put out, and that got me thinking, okay, if I were to go up against this, network, what all would this network be into as a money making mechanism? And that led me down that path. And when I drafted the first version, my first draft, I sent it off to Mike Foley Love, who's the chief operations over at Deliver Fund, because I wanted to make sure that it was real, that I got all the details right, and that I was hitting the right high notes. And he gave me some feedback. He gave me some more literature, so that way I could tweak it a little bit. But that's how that got started. And because it's like Mike and I were in the teams together way back in the day. Sal Hernandez, who also is like their director of U.S. operations, I believe is what his official title is now. But he worked for me once upon a time, so it's so surreal.
Yeah.
But that was just a buddy hookup type of thing. And then next thing I know, Mike was calling me. He's like, "Hey, have you heard of SkillBridge?" Yeah, I've heard of it. He's like, "Are you going to do one?" So see how that all came full circle.
Hey, Joe, I had a feeling. I had a feeling. I was like, okay, I'm reading through it, and I read it. I kind of started backwards. I've had your books on my to read list, and then when I reached out to you, I was like, well, I got to read at least one of them. So I said, I'll start with the most current one, and I read it in like 3 days. And I was like, okay, I know where she got this idea from. I hope I'm right, but I feel like I knew where you got it from, and I think that's really cool.
It's like I
It's
knew about it
always
because I was supporting Mike. You do
yeah,
that. He was a teammate, and you want to see your teammates succeed even when they're out. So when he did that, we were all rooting for him. So it's just funny how these things kind of make their way back together.
yeah. So you got 3 books out. You got
Yep.
a graphic novel. Shadow War just came out in March. Shadow Game, there's the first one. What's going on with the fourth one? Are we getting a fourth one? Where's it in
You,
development?
it is in development. So I have started writing the fourth one, and I have kind of like I did before, I have scenes in my head. I have a game plan for what I want to see this one become. And I'm very excited about it, but because I am about to move, like I just went on terminal leave. I mean, our lives are about to upend.
Hmm.
It's probably not going to be until next year that I get it out, but there will be a fourth book, and it's going to be in the same world with the characters that hopefully everybody has come to know and love. But it's going to be a very different story, and where you're going to get some different perspectives this time.
Okay.
So, and
Okay.
if you've read the Shadow War, at the end, whose perspectives you're probably going to get.
Yes. I
Yeah.
love I love the ending. I was like, okay. Okay. I like a good ending that makes me go, you got me there.
Hmm. Yep.
It's
So,
definitely I like the ending. I'll leave
okay.
it at that. I don't want to say
Yes.
anything I don't want to say anything spoiler. I like a good cliffhanger, but not so much that made me go, but what now? Like
It's like in the blood. Please tell me you're going to say in the blood, because I got to the end of in the blood and I wanted to scream. And I guess
I almost threw it across the room.
and then I feel like since we were talking AI earlier, I should say good day, Alice. But
Yes.
yeah, I get what you're saying. Like I'm so excited for it, but at the same time, I'm like, how am I supposed to wait? No.
I know. And I read it like the first week it was out.
Yeah,
And then I
oh,
thought about it and I said, I have to wait another year for this.
But we got the series, and like again, this kind of goes
Sure.
back to how supportive we all are of each other. Instead of it being like, well, everybody should be reading my book, I'm just like, God, when's the next Jack Carr come out?
Oh,
And everybody's like that.
but doesn't the Gray Man look good?
I can't wait. That's the best
Oh.
part is I was late to the party on Mark Greaney, so I'm going through all the court gentry right now. So that's something else that will help tide me over. So
So I'll tell you a funny story about that. Um, when I first read The Gray Man, I didn't like it. And
really?
I didn't. And I was like, I didn't like I read it as a reader before I was more of a fan. So I read it almost skeptical. I didn't like the writing. And then when he wrote Sierra 6 earlier this year, the cover looked so awesome. I was like, I'm going to try this again. But now I've been a student of the novels of thrillers, and I've been going
Mhm.
back and rereading Brad Thor and the Terminal List
Oh,
and
oh yeah.
Clancy's, and I've been studying how they wrote certain things in there. So I read that with my I kept that in mind when I read Sierra 6. So then I went back and reread The Gray Man, and I have like this entirely new appreciation for it. Like I underestimated it big time, and the whole court gentry thing is it's absolutely amazing, and I have a different appreciation for it. Hopefully, I'll meet Mark Greaney one day, and I can say that to his face. I can tell him and apologize to him, like I'm sorry because I really didn't appreciate you like I should have, and now like I'm all in. So I love The Gray Man. I think the movie looks amazing.
Yep.
I'm pumped for him and Jack having their things come out like this. I hope we get.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
I hope this is just a little bit of what's to come because
I
there's so
completely
many
agree.
good stories. I hope that
I completely agree.
they just start getting snatched up. I really do because it's going to be good stuff. It really is. And let me ask you this one question:
Okay.
who would play Elle Anderson if Amazon came knocking tomorrow?
Alicia Vikander.
Okay.
So yeah, she's been in a bunch of things like Tomb Raider is what pops into my head immediately. Is like
Okay.
she like that. Yep, love her. I had her in my head a lot. That a little bit of Angelina Jolie, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, kind of meshed in there too. But
I can see it. Yeah.
that's a little bit more in book two, which you'll appreciate when you get there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, before we go, tell everybody where they can find out more about you and find the books.
So I do have a website, amadair.com. All my social media is linked there, so it's very easy to find. I try to keep update on events, podcasts, all my books. You can order signed editions from me, so you don't have to go through Amazon. As a matter of fact, if you want the graphic novel, highly recommend you get it from me. Much cheaper, and you get it signed. And then I am on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter as AM Adair, and I am very easily searchable. Like
Awesome.
same picture.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you taking out the time, talking intel with me because I don't know it, and talking about your books and how you've really kind of put your experience into that. I think it's really awesome. It's very refreshing, and man, I kudo you on all your success you've had.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And thanks for having me.